On today's episode, we start out discussing hair sheep, and then we transition to biosecurity, which is an important topic for anyone out there. It's a really good listen, so let's get started with the Fast Five. What's your name?
I'm Wyatt Catron.
I'm Samantha. Or Sam.
Which do you prefer, Samantha or Sam?
It really doesn't matter to me.
Yeah. It's kind of like when my wife yells at me, it doesn't matter what she calls me, I'm going to come running.
You're still in trouble either way.
Yeah, either way. If I get by with her just using a little bit of my name, it's better than the whole name. But that's, yeah. What's your farm's name?
So it's Paragon Ranch. They're based out of Stillwater, Oklahoma. So that's where we've got the ewe flock.
Very good. And that answered our next question. Where's the farm located? Stillwater? I almost jumped ahead. What year did you start grazing animals?
We started in 2019. The flock got to Stillwater in early 2020, I believe.
Okay.
So we've been doing it up there for a bit.
Yeah. And what species do you graze?
Predominantly low input hair sheep. So we try to make hair sheep that are really parasite resistant, very maternal, and are still make really good, easy keeper ewes. We do bring in some custom grazed cattle. That's all we got as far as enterprises. We also sell fiberglass posts. Some of that going on, but those don't eat much grass.
Yeah, typically not, but you'll lose a little bit of area wherever they're stacked. Welcome to the Grazing Grass Podcast, the podcast dedicated to sharing the stories of grass-based livestock producers and exploring regenerative practices that improve the land, animals, and our lives. I'm your host, Cal Hardage, and each week we'll dive into the journeys, challenges, and successes of producers like you, learning from their experiences and inspiring each other to grow and graze better. Whether you're a seasoned grazer or just getting started, this is the place for you. Attention ranchers, are you ready to boost your ranch's profitability in 2025? Join Noble Research Institute for Noble Profitability Essentials in McKinney, Texas this January 28th, 29th. This transformative 2-day course will help you unlock the full potential of your land and livestock. Noble's experienced advisors, with over 200 years of combined experience, will guide you through proven strategies to enhance your bottom line. You'll learn how to improve soil health, maximize forage quality, reduce costly inputs, and optimize stocking rates. This course is designed to address your unique challenges and build lasting solutions for your ranching operation. Through hands-on activities and interactive conversations, you'll gain valuable skills to create a more resilient, productive, and profitable ranch that will thrive for generations. Don't miss this opportunity to learn from the best and secure your ranching legacy. Space is limited, so visit noble.org today to enroll in Noble Profitability Essentials in McKinney, Texas, January 28th, 29th. Invest in your land, livestock, and livelihood this January. 10 seconds about the farm. I really don't have too much, except you all will understand this. As I sat down to record this, I got a phone call and I had cattle out. So, went and got them in and got to repair a little bit of fence. At least the weather was nice. We have some cooler weather coming in, though. For 10 seconds about the podcast, thank you. For 2024, we are over 301,000 downloads for the lifetime of the podcast. So we ended 2024. In 2024, I didn't look up that number, but I think we're about 160 downloads we're about 160,000 downloads for that year. So very good. Wishing you a happy new year. Excited to see your growth for this year and hope you stick with us throughout the new year. Also on the podcast, today we're talking about biosecurity with Wyatt and Samantha. If there's something I didn't ask, shoot me a message. I think on the website you can even leave a voice message. Leave one of those, and I'll get in touch with Wyatt and we'll record a follow-up episode. To get started in our conversation today, tell us what you're doing currently, and then we'll hop into your background.
Okay. So I'm a mobile food animal veterinarian. I work at the Joplin Regional Stockyards and Leach Livestock Auction. When I'm not at those two places, do mobile work. We focus predominantly on small ruminants. So I'm licensed in 6 states now. So we go all over providing services to flocks that are big or small, all varieties.
Very good. And Sam?
Yes, so I'm a postdoc fellow at the University of Arkansas. So I basically graduated with my PhD in May and stayed on within my lab to continue my research. And so my research is on the respiratory microbiome and its role in bovine respiratory disease.
And that's very impressive. I'm sorry it's got that Arkansas part in there, being a OSU alumni, but okay. Did you both have interests in cattle and grazing growing up?
Yeah, so I grew up on we call it a hobby farm. Like we had all kinds of stuff. And I always thought that I'd be in a rural mixed practice somewhere, working on a little bit of everything. And then the more in college, the more I was exposed to it, I was like, what I really want to do is be helping livestock producers. And that's what got me to where I'm at today, is helping them make, like, our mission for Catron Veterinary Services is helping our producers be more productive and profitable. Because I feel like that's needed in every operation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I grew up on a commercial cow-calf operation in southern Oklahoma, and I was always really interested in science from a very young age. Like I used to I don't remember this, but my parents say I used to ask them to read me the Merck vet manual, but I never wanted to be a veterinarian for some reason, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But then I went to Oklahoma State and majored in animal science and got involved in undergraduate research and kind of fell in love with the laboratory and the microbiology side of stuff.
Oh, yes. And does Wyatt get you out helping with the sheep very much?
Yes.
I was afraid of that,
Yeah, a few farm calls.
Yeah, sometimes farm call.
Yeah, right. Now, regenerative practices, when did you all become aware of more regenerative practices? When you were growing up, were regenerative practices the norm?
No, it was when I was starting out, I wanted to get some sheep. The real reason I got sheep is I wanted to practice AI, so artificial insemination.
Oh, yes.
So I got a small flock of wool sheep. One thing after another, tried to expand those, and the bank wouldn't give me any money because they're like, oh, we can't give you a loan on sheep. Sheep don't make any money. There's no, like with cattle, we know the value of them, and that's what their thing was. I started looking at different ways to basically finance stuff and looking at grazing because, if you've only got a small place, you need to make the most use of that grass. Right. And so that's what got me started down that path. We actually ended up, I bought a small flock of sheep with just the cash I had, sold them, and then realized, hey, I can buy some stocker calves. We can leverage those stocker calves to buy more sheep.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Because the bank
like a
will loan,
true addict.
Yeah, because they have a value to the bank. And so the bank will loan you money against them. And so that's what kind of jump started us back into the sheep world. And the first set was wool ewes. And in April, when I sheared them for the first time, I said, I'm never doing that again.
Oh, yeah.
That's why we were into hair sheep.
When I was in high school in FFA, I showed dairy cattle. And I'd see all the people with the sheep and the amount of times they sheared them and shaped them. Like, I'm never having sheep. And then the pig people, just all the work. I was like, dairy cattle is much easier. Of course, then you're milking twice a day, so it's a little debatable. Yeah.
Depends on the work you want to do, I guess.
Right, exactly. What you find fun versus what you find tedious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sam, when were you introduced to regenerative practices?
Anybody, you right?
Yeah, probably about me.
Oh, yeah. So how did you educate yourself on regenerative practices, Wyatt?
YouTube University was probably the biggest one.
Oh, yeah.
YouTube videos, listening to podcasts. I got really into podcasts in undergrad. And I see you've got a stack of books behind you there. This is one of the bookshelves.
Oh, yes.
The less decorative one.
Yeah, the all kinds of books. And that's kind of how I got exposed to that was through YouTube, reading different books. Like, we haven't been to ranching for profit, but following some of those guys that are
Oh,
very
yeah.
involved in the program.
Yeah. Just on that tangent, have you read the books by, I'm trying to think, David Pratt's books? I couldn't think of his name.
So let's see, I've got both of them, but it's one of those deals that my time to
What?
read is.
You don't have to explain. I want to say I've read all of these, and
Yeah,
I'll guess I'll put it on the record. I'm a better book buyer than I am a book reader. Now, I have every
Oh, is
intention of
Wyatt.
making it. Yeah, I love books, and just getting to them takes some time. I really enjoyed the Pratt's books. They're not quite the writing style I enjoy and like, but there's a lot of information in there, and I really thought they were really good. And then just following on that ranching for profit, I haven't been there yet. One of these days I'll make it.
Yeah. Well, and I was lucky enough at the OSU library, they had it was actually by Stan Parsons, the original Ranching for Profit guy. They had
Yes.
his blue book in there. And so I read it out for
yes.
several weeks, and that's what I was going through all that, and it looked like it's printed on a typewriter, but
Oh, yes.
That's cool.
Well, that's very interesting. I'm actually needing to go down to the library. There's a book on breeds I'm wanting to look at, and they have a copy. So I'll have to add that to my list to go down there and look at.
yeah, it was really neat. And that's what gave me a lot of exposure to the Ranching for Profit stuff, other than what's out there on the internet and stuff.
Right. So what were some of those YouTube channels you found most beneficial?
Greg Judy's got a great one. Greg Christensen, we
Oh,
run
yeah.
Greg,
Oh, yes.
following him and what he's doing. I mean, there's quite a few, and just different lectures that they'll have recorded.
Oh,
That somebody will record at a conference and then put it online. And
yes.
there's several of those, like different Bondsma lectures and Johann Zietzman. I really enjoyed those.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I think oftentimes I need to put together a list of those videos out there. And I know I don't know them all, but yeah, when you start searching, there's a lot out there, but sometimes they're hard to find.
Yeah.
When you got the wool sheep, did you start implementing more regenerative practices into your practice then?
I did, because we had to make do with the pasture we had. And so we started rotationally grazing a little bit and getting that exposure. And then when the stalker calves came in, that's when I bought some polywire and we started
Oh, yeah.
that.
Now, when you started rotating those sheep, the first ones, I'm going to put you on the spot again, Wyatt. Sorry about this. But when you started grazing those first sheep, were you doing it because you thought this is going to be more regenerative, I'm going to be able to grow more grass, or was it for more parasite management?
That's a great question. So I think it was probably for the grass side of things.
Oh, yeah.
It's definitely both of them. We see both sides of
Oh,
it.
it
You
is,
get more
yeah.
grass, you get more rest, and then you have less parasites if you're good about it. As a veterinarian, we see some guys that come back too fast and
Oh, yeah.
parasite issues, but yeah, for the most part, managing your grazing takes care of all three of those.
Yeah. I know a lot of times when I talk to people, if it's cattle, they're like, I need more grass, I need lower inputs. If it's sheep or goats, they're like, well, I got to keep these things healthy.
Yeah.
And it benefits both of those. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you brought in stalkers. When you brought in those stalkers, did you go back and buy or buy wool sheep, or was that your point you went with the hair sheep?
That was the point I went with the hair sheep, because I said it took me like 2 days to shear 10 ewes, and I said I can't do this again. Like my back hurts. If we grow, we're not, definitely not, because the only sheep shear that I knew of in the time was actually west of Stillwater, and these ewes were all in eastern Oklahoma.
Oh, yes.
And so I was like, not driving half a trailer load to Stillwater to hang around all day and then bring them back. And so got into the hair sheep because it's easier to market too as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You're starting to see lots of hair sheep around. Just kind of like goats have blown up over the last couple of decades. You're seeing goats a lot more.
Well, last night at Leach, at Selborne there, had 2,000 head in, and I'd say 80% of those were sheep and goats. And then of that 80%, most of them were hair sheep.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I have not been to Leach auction. I've heard about it, and I've often thought I'd get over there. We typically market ours through Diamond, Missouri.
Okay. Yep.
So, yeah, one of these days I'll have to make over a Leach, see what they're doing over there.
Yeah, it's a neat place. I really enjoy Joe and Kyla. Like they've been really good to me, and we do all the ultrasounding for their special placement sale they have twice a year.
Oh, yes.
So it's been a good opportunity for us.
When you went with hair sheep, what breeds did you go with, or what were you looking for those initial sheep?
So I knew that they were going to be grazing, so parasite resistance was key for me. Because of OSU, they had a hair sheep flock already, and they had got into the Hopping Brothers genetics early on.
Oh, yes.
And being exposed to those ewes, how they were so parasite resistant, they were moderate, easy fleshing. Like that's when I knew I was like, okay, we need to find some more of these hopping sheep. And so all of our ewes are hopping in some way, whether they're direct from Joe and Haas through Greg Christensen, or we've gotten a few from Lee Ford.
Oh,
but they're all of those are hopping genetics kind of separated by time and place.
Oh, yes. So as you work on more parasitic resistance and more maternal abilities, are you staying within those lines, or are you bringing in some others?
So we've historically stayed within those lines and tried to keep buck lambs out of the best.
Oh, yeah.
Or the best buck lambs that we see at the time when we go through and work everything. And the way we've historically done it is we've kept, 10 to 20% buck lambs intact that we thought were good. And then, there's always going to be fallout as they age. And so by the time breeding season comes around, there's usually some that you really like and some that you thought you really liked. And so we turned those out as buck lambs and kept a yearling buck or two around as the second cycle came in. But this year we actually did something different. I've got a client that raises easy cares.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that breed, that's a half Romanov, a quarter White Dorper, and a quarter Totten. So we bought some buck lambs from him, actually kicked them out. Our goal is to increase our lamb crop.
Oh, yes.
Entity. That's the reason those came.
Well, I'm very interested in genetics on both sides. I'd love to get a couple Hopping Brothers rams in here. I'd love to get Easy Care ram or two in here and try them out. We're very Katahdin based and we raise our own rams. I think it's time we introduce some new blood, and that's definitely the areas that I'm looking at to introduce into my flock.
Yeah. Yeah, I think both those sheep have their place. Like the Easy Cares, he's more of a confinement operation. So I'm interested to see how those lambs do in pasture for us.
That will be.
But I think we've got enough parasite resistant already built into those ewes that I don't think we'll see them struggle too much on them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That'll be interesting to follow that and see how that goes for you. Yeah. Now, one thing I always struggle with is picking out rams that I want to keep. Because here's a issue I have that you may not have because you're probably going through an ultrasound in yours. That gives you a leg up. But making sure I'm looking at a twin ram versus a single ram, because those single rams can look really nice.
Yeah, they can. And that's what, most of the time, it's observation in the pasture. And that's over in Australia, they want everything to look white. Like all their sheep breeds are white.
Oh, yes.
I prefer a little bit of color because when you go out in the pasture, I can pick out the lambs and be like, okay, there's twin lambs. This one's got weird spots on his head.
Right.
And I kind of write it down, or I take a picture. So when it comes time to work them, when they're 20 yards away, and then when we get into the pen, I can find those ones that I really liked and make sure those gets pulled out.
Oh, yeah. Are you tagging lambs when they're born?
We did the first 2 years, and then it just got to be too much labor. Like there's too much going on, and we haven't found a better way yet. Mm-hmm. There's some nice technologies coming out that hopefully make that easier, but tagging at birth worked great until we had too many sheep.
I've tried it. I've had mixed results with it. I think I caused too many orphans one year when I was tagging early. I think I was tagging too early. But I'm slow, so I need to catch them when they're young.
Yeah.
In the hours, not days.
That's good. And tagging at birth does give you a good opportunity to get that. Like there's a few guys that do a maternal score. And so does that that take off? Like it kind of helps on the maternal side, but still it's just the labor that goes into it. You got to be out there. Like we were twice a day before school, going out, checking everything. And then after classes, we're coming back out and re-tagging, and it works good on the front end. and on the back end. But when you're having 10 to 20 lambs a day,
Oh, yeah.
or something comes up, it's just, that's the first thing that got dropped. It was like, look, later.
Well, and I know from your all's Facebook, you guys are not very busy. So I don't know how you get everything accomplished. So good job on that.
Well, thankfully, right now in Stillwater, I've got 2 guys that work part-time for me.
Oh, yes.
Between both of them, we managed to get a lot of the stuff done that needs to be done. And if it wasn't for them, yeah, there'd be a lot that got dropped.
Well, actually, I have that wrote down. How are you able to manage regeneratively long distance?
So that's been a learning curve, because like when I was still in school and we were grazing hard, I was trying to rotate those ewes every 1 to 3 days. We've kind of backed off that just a little bit now.
Oh, yes.
And the way our operation works is it's all leased ground, but it's all separate, different pastures. And so that was really handy too, is we can chop down the pastures that we're in and manage them that way.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And so our biggest place is 100 acres. We've got some smaller, like a 10-acre piece that we go to. And that was very easy because we drive the ewes down the road. They hit the 10 acres for a day or two. And then we go to a different place further down the road.
Oh, yeah. Are all of those fenced with permanent sheep type fencing, or are you having to go in and do anything there?
It's a mix of all the above. So our main place, it already had nice 2x4 wire in it. And so that's where we try to land, keep those ewes on it, just reduces predator pressure. And then as those lambs are a little bit older, we go into places that they've got offset high tensile wire off of the barbed wire fence. And then we've got another pasture that's cross town, and it's one of those things you just make it work. But there's a lot of town dogs out there, but they've also got a lot of coyote pressure. And so we don't take guard dogs out to that pasture. We just pin at night. And so we learned the first year that we're only taking mature, dry ewes out there, because we had 2 big issues where it was like, I know she had a pair of lambs this morning.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we learned just once the lambs are weaned, they go out to that pasture because they're dry and can go run on those different paddocks.
Right. And that makes sense. On your offset high tensile, are you just one strand?
I think you do it with one. Greg Christensen up in Kansas does it with one. We put 2 because I like to security. And we did have some Spanish goats.
Oh, okay. That's a whole different game.
Yeah, emphasis on did.
Yeah, emphasis on did. And they stayed in really well on that offset. I think there's there's an animal, there's a depth perception issue with those guys.
Right.
And so I think they're going to walk into it every time first and get shocked rather than being able to judge.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, the issues we had with the Spanish goats is they were getting out on our good fences. They found some rocks and were.
They'll help you find any hose you have. Yeah.
Yes, they were very good at that.
Yeah.
Which is, I live with my father-in-law with the rest of his Spanish goats.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So was that Sam's idea to get into the goats?
It was really your idea.
Yeah.
I like baby goats, so.
Oh,
yeah.
I tell people all the time my favorite animal on the farm are the goats. They just have so much personality. They make me say words I didn't know I wanted to say. But I love my goats. I've got a dozen head out here. I'd sold all down, and then I bought a few more because I enjoy them most of the time.
Those other times we were like, I don't know if we should be running goats.
There's other times I don't carry a rifle in my pickup because those other times happen, and we would be having goat stew. Yeah. On the fence on your offset, are you coming in so far in front of that fence and setting like a temporary fence or fiberglass pole, or do you have those offsets that set on your fence pushing out?
I like the fiberglass just because it's going to stay away from that fence. It's a very rigid piece. So we go a foot out and a foot up.
Oh, okay.
Like on that second wire, it's 2 foot up.
Oh, yeah.
But I like the rigidity of those fiberglass posts, whereas I think those pin locks or something like that, where you've got to
Right.
place, they break. We do have deer that come through there because I can tell. It still
Mhm.
hooks sometimes with that barb. And so you can kind of bring it out and flip it off. But I think with those plastic pieces or even the metal ones, we'd still have some issues
Oh, yeah.
with
Yeah.
being able to pull that fence away from the existing fence.
We went through and put a lot of those offsets, the metal out there with the pin.
Yeah.
And yeah, in places we didn't get them close enough together. They're getting tangled up in the barbed wire, and that does so good for the electric fence running. So yeah, has some issues. Yeah. Sam, I want to include you more in this conversation. What have you told Wyatt he should do with the sheep that he's not done?
The biggest thing I think that made my life significantly better was the Tapari shoot. That made my life so much better when we worked stuff.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So we've got a few nice pieces of equipment. I try not to have a lot of overheads, but
Right.
there's definitely times where some great equipment will make stuff more efficient. And so, like for us, we've got a Tapari sheep handler because we can keep better records on those ewes, track weights, makes working them a lot easier. And so that's what she's referring to.
Because I used to be the catcher, and I still am, but it's much less.
And it'll
Oh,
be
yeah.
different this year because I had a client that made his own working cradle, like you've probably seen in Australia, New Zealand, where they put him down a little chute. And so we're going to try that out this year because he got it made and I think it was August when I picked it up. So our lambs were too big to fit in it. So I didn't even try to mess with it.
Oh, yeah.
I'm looking forward to trying it, seeing if that makes it a little easier for us.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I will admit, getting some sheep equipment made a world of difference for us. Before, I'd go out and wrestle them in our cattle pens, who I thought would work great for sheep, and they don't. And I would come in and, well, usually that day I was just tired. The next day I was sore and knew I got beat up. It's like, ooh. Now, Wyatt, I think you went to Arkansas. Yeah, you did go to Arkansas, but you went to Australia with Dr. Gold down there.
Yep. With Dr. Tim Gull, for Flock's sake, is his business name. Nice little play of words.
It is, yeah. It sounds like a very Australian name of a company, to be honest.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So he was a sheep consultant. That's all we did while I was down there is mess with sheep every day. It was a great opportunity to see how a country that does it on such a scale, what they're doing and how they're able to do it. Because for perspective, the United States has 5 million ewes. Australia has 50 million ewes.
Oh, wow. I hadn't heard those numbers. It's not surprising to me, but it is somewhat 10 times as much.
Yeah. And the other best way to put it is everybody in the U.S. has cattle. Some people have sheep or goats. Everybody in Australia had sheep. Some people had cattle.
Oh, interesting.
And
Yeah.
so, like, we were talking about, like, I was jealous of all the sheep products that were over there. And they're like, yeah, but we don't have any good cattle products. And
Oh, yes.
I was like, you make a fair point. I'm sorry.
Yeah. What did you learn being over there that you brought back and thought, I've got to do, or I've got to do better, or try to mimic that in some way?
The biggest thing was scale. Like, they do everything at a much better scale. Like, they're able to run stuff more efficiently. Genetics, record keeping, that type of stuff. Like, just need to be better at record keeping the right records. Tim, we put on a couple workshops about lambing surviving. And Australia's extension programs over there are very good at, they've got one program called Towards 90. It's about boosting lamb survival, or live ewe management, which is about taking care of those ewes because it'll make you more productive. And so I brought back a lot of stuff that we're trying to implement now.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Also, I guess from a vet side, my pregnancy scanning crate that we use now is modeled after Tim's. And I made a few revisions to it, like took some ideas off a Scottish crate, but that's what it allows us as a veterinarian to really efficiently go through some of those commercial flocks. And so we can run 150 to 200 ewes an hour, and we're calling opens, singles, and twins.
Oh, yes.
Whereas like if you were to call your local vet, they're probably going to come out with an ultrasound that's not really made for sheep and goats. It'll work. But then you're also going to have to grab every one of them and walk up behind, bend over, put it in the abdomen. Whereas I sit in a nice, comfortable little lawn chair and we run through, hook it up next to an alley, and we're good to go.
Oh, yes. And with that, and I know asking this question, I can tell you the answer immediately what you're going to say. Because I'm going to ask, should all producers be doing that? And I know where you're selling this as a service, the answer is yes, but can you tell some reasons why we should?
Yeah. So like there's certain operations where they don't have enough numbers where maybe blood testing would be better. We're calling your local veterinarian if your numbers are big enough, but that's usually like in the single digit flocks. But the main reasons why I tell clients they need to be doing this is number one, you can get rid of your opens or do something else with them. And the biggest part is nutritional allocation. So a twin needs a lot more nutrients. A twin bearing ewe needs a lot more nutrients than a single bearing ewe. A single bearing ewe still needs a lot more nutrients than an open.
Oh, yeah.
Because an open ewe is just on maintenance. She's freeloading. She didn't punch her ticket.
Right.
Like you've got options, and if you know those things, you can put your open ewes in a different pasture where you can kind of forget about them, or you can take them to the sale, sell those cull ewes and pay back some of your hay costs. Because like we've got one client that they sold their open ewes, and of course they made money on the open ewes, but we figured out on the feed savings alone on what they would have cost to feed those open ewes, that paid for me coming up there.
Oh, yeah.
So the cost of me scanning was cheaper than feeding open ewes that long. And so that's a really, I guess that's a really good opportunity to add some value to an operation, and it doesn't necessarily hurt them because most of the time they're going to be saving money by having me come in.
Oh, yeah. Well, one aspect, and we haven't done this, what I do whenever I'm lambing, when they lamb, they get, or the ewes that haven't lambed yet are pushed forward. The ewes with lambs are left behind. So then I'm working with two flocks as I work through. And when we're over it, usually whenever the sell is, and we've said they've had long enough to lamb, everything that's not lambed yet goes to sell. But if they're going because they're open, they would never lambed. I just fed them how many days, 150 days, for no benefit or very little.
Yeah. So like guys will say like, you need to be charging yourself for that, because whether a bred ewe or a ewe that had twins is eating that grass, or you baled it and sold it to somebody, like you should kind of be charging those ewes that price.
Right. Yeah.
And so, an open ewe, she's going to hang around your operation for 100 to 150 days, depending on when you go through.
Yeah. And then the other thing that, as I was looking at your website and thinking about it, the other thing is you can call on those single bred ewes. I think you had it on one of your graphics, maybe, that would be a way to improve your lambing percent.
Yeah.
And improve your genetics for future lines, because we want to sell those that have singles, but saying doing that versus actually doing that is a little bit tougher than you think it would be.
Well, I've got one client, they actually do the opposite on their ewe lambs. They only want their ewe lambs to have singles.
Okay, I can see that on ewe lambs, yeah.
Yeah, and their logic was she has a hard enough time counting to one. We don't really want her to count to two.
Yeah.
What it did was we sorted off the twins, and those twins they had a lot more value in them because they were able to say, hey, these things are carrying twins to somebody that was worth a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't want to have to deal with that. And so they actually increased the value of those ewe lambs by knowing that there was twins inside there. And then one thing earlier, Cal, talking about making replacements, it's harder when we've got smaller flocks, like we don't even do it yet. But if you have the opportunity to split those singles and twins into different groups, then you can pick your replacements out, because you're like, well, if it's in that pasture, it had to have been a twin.
Oh, yeah. That would help out, yes.
You got to manage two pastures, and then it's going to look well.
Yeah, there's some trade-off there, but I could also see the benefit. It's really going to be how you value the inputs versus the outputs there. One thing on those yearling ewe lambs, if they have twins, I know Dr. Dave Sparks. I'm not sure if you knew him when he was live with Kiko Goats. He always said for does, he expects them to have 3 kids in the first 2 years. It can be 2 their first year, 1 their second, 1 their first, 2 their second. He said it just takes too much out of them to have twins as a first one to expect them to do twins every year after that. Let's go ahead and shift gears and go into our overgrazing topic for today, sponsored by Redmond. At Redmond, we know that you thrive when your animals do. That's why it's essential to fill the gaps in your herd's nutrition with the minerals that they need. Made by nature, our ancient mineral salt and conditioner clay are the catalyst in optimizing the nutrients your animals get from their forage. Unaltered and unrefined, our minerals have the natural balance and proportion that your animals prefer. This gives your herd the ability to naturally regulate their mineral consumption as they graze. Our minerals won't just help you improve the health of your animals, but will also help you naturally build soil fertility so you can grow more nutrient-dense pasture year after year. Nourish your animals, your soil, and your life with Redmond. Learn more at redmondagriculture.com. We're going to talk about biosecurity on the farm, and this is a question I reached out to you all to see if you all would come on and talk about biosecurity, because I've had some listeners reach out to me to say, hey, we need more information on biosecurity. So maybe to start the ball rolling, what is it when we say biosecurity?
So the goal of biosecurity is to prevent more diseases from coming in. I mean, that's the overarching goal. And I'll say there's a spectrum on biosecurity. Like, you can be as biosecure as some of these poultry and swine facilities are now to having zero biosecurity, but there's a spectrum. You know, some guys, it depends on what you're comfortable with.
I know for us, we had some broiler houses for a while, and biosecurity there was much greater. With our beef cattle, maybe I shouldn't put this out to the world, but biosecurity is not really something we think about, to be honest.
Yeah. And I'd say that's the mindset of a lot of producers that raise ruminants. You know, it's something that's in the back of their mind, but it's not until you have an issue. And then if you have an issue, you're too late. So,
yeah, I know with my goats, when I got goats back in the early 2000s, I had a few. I wanted to expand my flock, and I found some not too far away, and they just didn't look very good, to be honest. Now, if I could go back and tell myself what was wrong with them, I could now, because I know exactly what was wrong with them. But at the time, I was coming to it with a very cattle mindset that I can solve their problems, I can get them in better condition, and they'll make some good animals. What I did was brought in some parasites that were a little too resistant and caused me problems for years.
yeah. And so parasites are a big one. You talk about abortion diseases, foot rot. I mean, those are all things that I see not every day, but we talk about producers with all the time.
So what should a producer have in their biosecurity plan, or how they approach this?
So the best way is, whether because I'm a veterinarian, I'm going to say work with your local veterinarian or work.
Right. Of course.
There's a reason for that, is you need to work with somebody else, because we all have blind spots. So working with somebody that's outside of the operation is going to allow you to find some of those issues that you may not have realized you may have in the future. Does that make sense? Yeah. So when we talk about, like, one of our CE conferences recently, we talked about developing a biosecurity plan for feedlot. Well, so you got to think about the silage that comes in, the feed that gets delivered every day, the fuel, the people that are coming in. And so there's stuff that me and you, Cal, it slips the back of our mind that even comes in.
Oh, yeah.
At all. And so to have an outside person kind of evaluate stuff is very, very handy.
When we think about the average farmer out here, And you may want to go, well, I was going to say the average. The average in Craig County, where I am, is a few hundred acres. Some other counties have a little bit smaller. But when you think about the average farmer, what should they be planning on? Should they, and when I ask that, should they be isolating new animals? Should they be worried about visitors?
I guess big things, they should definitely be isolating new animals. Like that's the biggest thing. We recommend 30 days. And so we like those animals to be in either a separate facility. Like if you've got a pasture that's way across the farm or separated from the farm, that's a great opportunity to isolate those guys for 30 days, or have like 2 degrees of separation. So don't make them share a fence line, have 2 fence lines between them. That way they can't have nose-to-nose contact. Visitors, I would say it depends on the visitors. You know, if it's other producers, depending on their operation, you may want to be a little more cautious.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, there's ways around that. Like I've got one client that he was worried about getting foot rot. And because they had a guy coming to buy sheep from him that had foot rot. He was like, what do I need?
Oh, yeah.
And so stuff like that, just ask them to wash their trailer and you can disinfect it when it gets there. And something else we don't think about is our working facilities. You know, our working facilities usually where we also have people load out of. And so if we're worried about somebody bringing stuff in, a lot of times our working facilities are centrally located because it's easy for us.
Right, yeah. As I think about ours, it's right here in the middle, yeah.
Yeah. But when you have somebody that's going to be loading stuff out and potentially bringing stuff in, you kind of want to have a separate facility, even if it's just a pen with a ramp that you could have on the edge of your place so they can back in to the edge of the property and load out and go on.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of driving across the whole farm and loading up in the middle and knocking shavings and infective material, you know, right where everything's going to walk.
So one thing is you think of, as you say that, and I think about, so if we bring new animals in, and to be honest, we're not someone who brings a lot of new animals in, but if we bring new animals in, we send them, we unload them, they're into our tub, they're right up our chute, our alley, and then they're out with the herd. So I should be isolating them, but you also mentioned I should be disinfecting and sanitizing my chute and alleyway.
That would be my recommendation if you're bringing new stuff in. And because you're going to have a little herd immunity, I mean, I would recommend it before and after because your flock may have something that they haven't been exposed to. But we argue that they're going to get exposed to it as soon as you kick them out of quarantine.
Yeah.
But definitely after, because stuff like foot rot can hang around in your facilities for about 2 weeks, that bacteria can. And so if you unload them, process them, and kick them back out to your isolation pen, well, something may happen and you may have to work a ewe through there in the next week.
Oh, yeah.
Well, if you don't do it immediately, you know, it's something we forget about. And then all of a sudden, everything's got foot rot.
Oh, yeah. So when we say sanitize and disinfect, when I say that, I'm thinking you're washing stuff, then some kind of bleach mixture to sanitize. Is there a better way?
So there's a lot of different disinfectants out there on the market. We use one that covers a broad spectrum of bacteria and viruses because we're taking this scanning crate from farm to farm. We disinfect it every time.
Oh,
but
yeah.
The key part to remember is that most disinfectants do not do well in organic matter. So manure, hair, dirt. And so we need to wash everything, get all the debris off, and then disinfect.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what a lot of people forget. They'll just be like, oh, okay, well, we just spray this disinfectant on, it works. But the manure will actually render that disinfectant ineffective. It's always important to wash everything first and then disinfect.
Oh, yeah. Well, that washing would be our first step that we haven't done. So as I think about that, that's quite an undertaking that I don't look forward to, but
it can be, but like I've got a Harbor Freight spray. I love Harbor Freight.
Oh, yes.
Jim's laughing because
He sent me to Harbor Freight this morning.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
But it's a little battery powered spray pump. And after we leave a farm, I pull into a car wash. We wash everything out, pump and spray down the whole scanning crate, spray the tires, and then I go sit in the truck for 10 minutes and let it set. And then I come back out and rinse everything off, and we're on to the next place.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. And Wyatt, I never send my wife to Harbor Freight because I want to go in there. She will not buy enough.
Well, I usually try to not take
Yeah,
some.
it was stressful.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and if I go in there with, and she's like, okay, what's on your list? I'm like,
Yeah.
where's-
I make him
Oh, yeah.
I
to
want her to
focus.
be Allie's.
Well, you know, to be honest, I cannot stand going in a grocery store. And my wife and I approach a grocery store differently. She's going to check each aisle to see what's available, and I'm going to work from a list and get out of there.
It's either like hungry.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah. Then you find the cookie aisle.
Yeah, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I need this.
Yeah.
I started doing Walmart pickup a lot.
Oh, I love Walmart
be on
pickup.
track a little more.
Yeah, I love Walmart pickup. Getting back on the subject of biosecurity, is there anything we should worry about from species to species?
Yeah, there's diseases crossover, but if you're not changing the animals on your operation, there's not a ton of things that you really have to worry about. Does that make sense? Like, as long as you're not
Right,
rotating
right.
all the time, rotating is in like buying and selling is what I mean by
Right.
that.
Right. So for my Flurd, most time they're operating separate, but sometimes they're together. Basically, they've already infected each other if they're going to infect each other because they've been together a lot. Now, I know for a lot of dairies, goats as well as cattle, yonis is a big thing. That's not, to us, has not been traditionally a problem with our beef cattle. Is that something we should be concerned about? Should we want animals tested for that before we bring them in?
So that's a great one because there's no program. Like we've got a brucellosis program, a pseudorabies program. There's no governmental program that tells us this is what we need to do, which
Yeah.
would be helpful in some instances because we would actually test more often. And so certain producers, we see it a lot in seed stock producers that check for yonis
Oh, yeah.
because those are high value animals. For most
Right.
people, they don't test for it because it's one of those diseases that it's going to affect your older animals, which is going to make them less productive. And so usually they just cull. I mean, that's
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
I see a lot at Joplin, I see a lot of cows. Like, you could have yonis just
Oh,
based
yes.
on the clinical signs, but it's something that if we're not testing for, we don't know. And so the testing's not, nobody does it a ton besides those select operations because
Oh, yeah.
they want to keep that out. But it is a concern. And, we talked about Australia. Over there, yonis is a big disease, and they actually vaccinate for it in some areas. So they've
Oh,
got
yes.
areas that are clean and areas that are vaccinated.
Oh, okay. Kind of like brucellosis used to be more so. I know that's changed a little bit, but yeah.
But yeah, same idea there.
When we think about respiratory diseases, is a 30-day isolation good enough or quarantine good enough, or should we be doing something different there?
Sam may have a different opinion than me on this. Her level of knowledge on the respiratory system in vet school, we covered about this deep.
Oh, yeah.
He's gone all the way, my hands way down to deer. I can't even.
Well,
But I think 30 days is enough because when we take it to a feedlot perspective, when they bring in new cattle, we look at BRD cases. Most of those cases of BRD happen in your first 2 to 3 weeks. So 14, 20,
oh, okay.
we see most of those BRD cases. There's some nuances to that, but most of them we see in the first 2 weeks.
And let's shift gears just a little bit and talk about bringing breeding stock in. Because most people, for most farms, the main new animals we're going to bring in are new breeding males.
Yeah, so with the males, I always try to advocate to get a breeding soundness exam done to make sure he's indeed fertile before you turn him out. Because we have seen issues with that. We had one flock we scanned, 600 ewes, 5% bred.
Oh, wow. That would hurt.
That's a bad day. Yeah, it was not.
Yeah, that is.
So we had a lot of conversations But we were looking in the rearview mirror. You know, we were already past all the stages of intervention we could have done beforehand. And so making sure those new guys have a semen eval done. Over in Australia, they taught me to look at the 4 T's. So we look at teeth, testicles, toes, and tackle, which is penis.
Oh, okay. Because I was struggling with the 4T there, but okay.
Yeah, I guess that's their word for it, but I was like, okay, tackle it is. Like
Tackle,
3 T's
yeah.
east.
Well, now when I go fishing, I no longer have a tackle box. I'm just changing that now. It's going to have a new name.
Yeah. But we want to look at teeth, like, you know, unless you're buying ram lambs or bulls that are 18 months or something like that. If you're buying something that's got a little age to it, you want to be sure those teeth are actually still there, because they can be a broken mouth. They can chip off teeth because they have to be out grazing. So a broken mouth sheep, you know, he's got some age to it. He's going to have a harder time keeping in good condition when he's breeding ewes if he's having to work a little harder to eat. Toes, we want to make sure those toes are nice and short. We don't have long toes. I don't like triggered feet, so we try to cull for that on our ewe flock.
I agree.
But that is an issue, is, you know, you want to make sure to at least look at them and make sure they're not long, overgrown, curled, something like that. And then on the testicles, make sure, like as a veterinarian, we palpate them, make sure they feel like they should, because especially with sheep, you can have ovine brucellosis, and that actually causes a lot of infertility in your bucks, which means that ewes don't get bred.
Oh, yeah. When you think about your breeding soundness exam, we're really bad about not always doing that. We do it sometimes. We think we should do it. I'll be honest, I just turned out 6 rams and I didn't get it done on any of them. But I tell myself I'm going to be okay if I have a dud in there because I turned out multiple rams. Is that going to solve some of that issue?
So there's yes and no. So it can. But the other thing that comes into effect is you can have the dominant bull, the dominant ram effect, where if your dominant one is infertile, he's still not going to give everybody else the chance to breed. And so some research out of Australia, New Zealand, the New Zealand group, they did DNA testing after the fact in multi-sire groups and showed that one buck bred like 60 to 80%, sired 60, 80% of the lamb crop. So you got to think about, so if he does that, but he's infertile, all those ewes are taking more time to either cycle and get bred, or they never get bred in the breeding season. And so there's, yes, it can work, and no, it can also work. Like there's good and bads to throwing out multiple ones and not knowing, because in the past we've done it too, you know, and just said, fingers crossed, I hope they're fertile.
Oh yeah. And I'll be honest, just a couple of years ago, I had a terrible breed back percentage with my cattle. Now I feel it was my mineral program at the time, but yeah, that really hurt when I did the pregnancy test on them.
Yeah. And that's another reason I pitch for pregnancy scanning and preg checking your cows, is because if you don't do it, you know, you kept that cow for 9 months without, a sheep, thank goodness we just got to wait 5 months. But yeah, if you keep them that long, you're waiting for something that never arrives. And so if you know ahead of time, you can make plans.
And to chase that just a little bit more, and I know we're moving off of biosecurity just a little bit with this question, but we do blood tests, the bioprine. And I say that I've also done some of the instant tests, which are 15 to 30 minutes. I did a handful of those just to try them and see how it went.
Yeah.
That versus palpation versus ultrasound. Is there going to be a big difference in the results? What's your thoughts on those?
So on the blood test with the bioprint, I don't know anything. I haven't done any digging on the instant results as far as how accurate there's going to be.
Oh, yeah.
So the bioprint, it's accurate. It's like 95% accurate, but there's caveats to it. So it tells you when bred. But if you have something that slipped that pregnancy, the protein that they're looking for will still float around in there for another 60 days or so.
Oh, yeah.
So in all actuality, like if I had been scanning, I'd called her open.
Oh, yeah.
Blood test called it bred. Yeah. And so there's nuances like that. You also have to, if you're going to do blood tests, you got to have the ability to bring them back in if you're going to do anything with that data.
Oh, yeah.
You got to bring them in, sort them again. Whereas pregnancy scanning, we know right there, open singles, twins, and they get a paint mark. So whether we sort them off the gates, off the front, or they do something with them later, they've at least got it known right there. They don't have to read ear tags.
Oh, yeah. 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 Good points with that. I know, or I don't know. From what I recall reading about the bioprinting, it's 99% accurate if it calls them open, 95% accurate if it calls them bred because of what you said.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some challenges to each. And like something we've seen in a couple flocks is we've actually diagnosed some tumors.
Oh, yes.
With some sheep. And so they would have had no idea. So I asked them, I said, hey, what's the history of this ewe? And it was like, well, she actually hasn't marked any in like 2 months. And I'm like, it's because she's got a tumor we need to talk about. And so something like that, a bioprint blood test would have never picked it up, and we didn't have.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Now, you mentioned marking there. Do you all use marking with your all's rams?
No, we don't. Just because it's been so hard. It would be hard to keep up with those guys. And we run multi-sire paddocks, so that's what we turn out several.
Yeah.
And so it'd be hard to keep track of those crayons and catch them. Labor gets in the way of that one.
Well, I'm an efficient farmer, so I don't. And efficiency is just laziness with good PR. I'm really a lazy farmer, and that sounds like more work to me.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really beneficial in like our club land producers when they.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're putting them in jugs. For guys like us that are pasture lambing, I just kind of chalk that up as information we're not going to really need, like data we're not going to use, because like we'll still prank scan them and know whether it actually worked or not. So having a mark date isn't really going to help us, or it isn't going to allow us to do much.
Right. Yeah. Not going to change your management much. To be honest, we got a scales in our cattle chute, and we cannot run an animal across that without weighing them. And I tell Dad, sometimes we don't have to weigh them. We just got to weigh it the other day, and we're not doing anything with it. But, we went so long without one, we just weigh everything.
Well, I'm always curious when they run across our sheep handler. Sometimes I just want to know when they come across. Yeah. I think it's 140 pounds. When they come across, it's actually 150. Okay. You kind of judge, like,
yeah. Yeah. We do not have scales in our sheep alley, so that would be really nice. Of course, our sheep alley is not really made to isolate one by one. It's a alley that I get them in the 16-foot where I can do something with them.
Yep. Yep. And it works really well, and it's good to have at least a reference weight, at least an idea. Because we talked about deworming, it's good. You don't want to underdose. You don't want to overdose. You want to be pretty accurate.
I know we got off the subject of biosecurity. I just want to swing back to it and ask, is there anything we didn't discuss about biosecurity we should have brought up?
So one thing I had written down, and we can hit on some loading facilities in the quarantine isolation, is even in your own operation, it's good to keep in mind the order which you see your livestock. So you want to start with like your youngest and healthiest stock, and then move backwards to your older and then eventually sick stock.
Oh, yeah.
So you got bottle lambs. You want to go check on them first. Then you want to check on ewes, whatever, and then the bucks or something like that. And then lastly is your new introductions where your sick pen. Because we don't want to go backwards from that and drag everything from the sick pen back into everything else, because you're probably like me. You don't spray off your boots and disinfect on your own place from pen to pen. Like,
no, I don't. Yeah.
But if we keep in the back of our mind, hey, let's check on that sick pen last, because that'll be the last thing we do for the day before we go inside, the odds of bringing something back out of there are pretty.
I've heard that before, and I think that's a great reminder. And to be honest, in practice, I never do it. So that's something I need to start thinking more about. And to be honest, we don't often have a sick pen, so it's not really a big thing, I think, for most farms. But whenever you do, it's important to remember that. But going from young stock and work up in age makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it's something like like that. Most operations, they don't have a giant sick pen like a feed yard would because
Right.
I'm not dealing with that every day.
Yeah. And if we do, we've got other problems. Yeah. Well, Wyatt and Sam, it is time for our famous 4 questions. Same 4 questions we ask of all of our guests. And we're going to make both of you answer them, so get ready. So, Wyatt, if you need to steal some of Sam's answers, go ahead. Our first question, what is your favorite grazing grass related book or resource?
So mine is Thoughts and Advice from an Old Cow by Gordon Haskell.
Oh, yes.
So that book,
Yeah.
talked a lot about how he ran his stocker operation, and he was pretty low input. And he talks about, there's one line in there, and probably going to butcher it, but he talks about the difference between being cheap and being tight. He said, most people think I'm cheap, but really I'm tight. And his example was if he had 2 hammers and he needed some cash, he'd sell one hammer and go on. But anytime he looked at adding something, he wanted to make sure it returned value, which is what we should.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, if I can spend $1 and make $2, I'm going to spend that $1. And that was his example of being tight versus being cheap, is he held on to it unless he knew it was going to make him an ROI.
Yeah. Excellent advice.
I'm going to steal Wyatt's answer because I don't read a lot of books like that.
But for the papers you're reading, I don't know if a lot of our audience is going to be reading them. I'm probably not going to be reading them.
Yeah, so I can tell you about my favorite paper, but it's not very uplifting.
Oh, yeah. Okay. We'll go with that. Our second question, what is your favorite tool for the farm?
So I had several that came to mind, whether it's the Tapari, the sheep handler, makes it more efficient. We imported an auto feeder that actually allows us to feedlot those lambs a little bit. It reduces acidosis, and it just keeps it feed in front of them, which is what we needed, because I've got written down here, if it's hard to do, you're not going to do it for very long.
Oh, exactly right.
You're probably thinking of some times where you did that, and if you're having to drag feed buckets out to a feeder pen every day, it's probably not going to want to feed lambs very long. Those would be my 2 favorite tools, would be those things, because it allows us to be very efficient when we're doing things.
With the auto feeder, what type of auto feeder is it? Does it have an auger, or is it one of these self feeders that's supposed to limit their intake?
So it has an auger in it.
Oh, okay.
It's a Feed Tech auto feeder that we imported from Australia. Yeah. And so it augers down a line, and ours is about 40 foot long. So we got basically 80 foot of feeder space. And so you can set it up to where there's a sensor. And if that proximity sensor has feed in front of it, it will run. But when they delay the feed, it'll kick on again. So if we're doing an ad lib, feedlot system works well for that, keeping fresh feed in there.
Oh, yeah.
Because with self feeders, they can kind of do some sorting and you end up with just old feed in the bottom. Or you can do it at a limit feed where you know how much it's going to auger out when it runs until it gets full. So you can have it kick on twice a day or 3 times a day. And so it's pretty flexible, and I like that part. It's very flexible and modular too. If we want to add on to it, we just extend it a little bit. But with that 40-foot unit, we could feedlot 960 lambs or something is what we figured up on the headspace.
Oh, yes.
And we're not there. Yeah, we're not there.
Yeah.
But, we don't have to keep adding things to it.
Yeah.
That's what I felt was key in certain times, is sometimes in order to get to that next step, you just got to get the equipment to do it. And figure out how to get there, rather than getting there and be like, I'm so tired of working 23 hours a day feeding lambs.
Well, we talk about the work-life balance, not that it's a balance, but you've got to have somewhat of a balance there, even with the ebb and flow of everything.
Sam's looking at me because, this week at Joplin, they had a special sale. So, we had a yearling special on Monday and then a special cow sale. And the regular cow sale on Wednesday, we sold 1,000. The cow sale on Thursday had 2,000 head. Back and forth, I put in 80 hours this week.
Oh, yeah.
No, by Thursday.
Right, Thursday night.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, just to go on that subject, Of course, you're younger, you can handle it. I cannot. Sam, what's your favorite tool? And I know you're not going to say Wyatt because he's already talked about the lawn chair he uses on the farm.
I really like the sheep handler
Oh,
because
yes.
before, anytime we worked everything, which I still do catch the little ones because they're too small to go through. But it was me catching everything because
Oh,
most
yeah.
of the time it was occasionally we would have a few extra people when we worked, but it would there's been times that it was just us two. And that can get exhausting.
Well,
it can.
I should say that it's not my idea to have Sam catch everything.
I don't like to do anything.
Oh, okay.
Needles, vaccinating, stuff like that. He's like, I'll just catch. Usually about halfway through, I'm like, I can trade you. And she's like, nope, we're not injecting them. We're not doing anything at you.
I didn't
Yeah.
go to no.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. She chose that. So,
I'm like, as long as you know, you made that decision.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Now, everybody driving by is going to think I'm a lazy person out here making my wife do all this. Yeah.
Not being, but the sheep handler, when it catches them pneumatically and it can run them automatically, actually with the sensors it's got on it, it makes it really easy to work stuff.
Yeah.
We also use it. So my parents have, I don't know, a lot of Spanish goats. And
Oh,
we
yeah.
use it there also. And it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, because deworming
Because
the
they're
goats,
even worse than the sheep, I think. And they know how to use their horns.
Oh, yeah.
and a goat will use its body weight and throw you around. And so by the end of the day, your wrist hurt, everything. And the first time we took it down there, I said, Patrick, I don't know if it's going to work or not on these goats. Like, it's built for sheep. But we're going to try it. And you guys castrate kids. I'll work the doe goats off, and we'll see what happens. Well, so usually we castrate kids and then work does. I had finished the does, me and another guy, and we didn't break a sweat. And they were still over there castrating kids. And afterwards, Patrick goes, hey, you're going to bring that back every time we got to work.
Yeah.
I was like, so I knew again that from somebody who did not want it down there, that it must work real well.
Oh, yeah.
He was all for it.
Yeah. He wanted to run it next time.
Yeah. Well, we did let them this year, and they were like,
Oh, okay.
awesome. No.
Yeah. I've seen YouTube videos. I think a sheep farmer in UK has one that he uses. I can't think of the name, but I was like, oh, that's amazing. Or it appears amazing to me.
It is.
Yeah, it's really awesome. And I need to be better about taking videos and recording everything. But the problem I get is I get so busy working everything that I'm like, oh, crap, I really should have stopped and recorded all this. So,
Yeah. Our third question, what would you tell someone just getting started?
So my advice is, and I think you've had this same, I think people have said it's a common theme, is you got to start somewhere. If that's what you want to do, you got to get started somewhere, whether it's 10 acres or 100 acres. But also when you're doing this, if you know that you want to be at 100 head or 500 head, build your facilities with that in mind. Because, we've got 20 head. The facilities for that place look a lot different than facilities for 200 head. And so if you know that you want to get there in 5 years, try, if you can afford it, build those facilities to run that amount of livestock. So you're not having to change them every every year or two when you've got way more stock. Because that's the biggest thing that we've tried to do is we did that. And we could have built for what we had, and then we had some more cash, so we built a little bit more. Well, piece of advice, if you got the opportunity to, try to build for what you're going to instead of build for what you've got.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. Yeah. And Sam, what would you tell someone just getting started?
I think both in terms of like a grazing operation or like a career, whether it's veterinary medicine or grad school or whatever, is never be afraid or ashamed to admit when you don't know something, because no one knows everything ever. Even the experts still don't know everything. And so being able to admit when you don't know something and ask questions is how you learn new things. And who knows, like maybe no one knows the answer to it and you can kind of find out something new through the research side of things. But yeah, I think it's always admit when you don't know something and never be afraid to ask questions. even if they seem like maybe like dumb to you, there's no stupid questions. That would maybe be my advice.
Excellent advice there. And if I didn't admit to what I didn't know, I wouldn't have much to say.
Yeah.
Lastly, where can others find out more about you?
So you can find Paragon Ranch on Facebook, Instagram. We've got a website, Catron Veterinary Services on Facebook, Instagram, the website. So, or you can just friend me on Facebook.
Oh, okay.
He
Yeah,
shares
yeah.
everything.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you go to my Facebook page, I've got everything linked. So
Very good. Wyatt and Sam, we really appreciate you all coming on today and sharing with us.
thanks for having us, Cal. It's been a great opportunity.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Grazing Grass Podcast, where we bring you stories and insights into grass-based livestock production. If you're new here, we've got something just for you. Our new listener resource guide is packed with everything you need to get started on your listening journey with the Grazing Grass Podcast. Gives you more information about the podcast, about myself, and next steps. You can grab your free copy at grazinggrass.com/guide. Don't miss out. And hey, do you have a grazing story to share? We're always looking for passionate producers to feature on the show. Whether you're just starting out or have years of experience, your story matters. Head over to grazinggrass.com/guest to learn more and apply to be a guest. We'd love to share your journey with our growing community of grazers. Until next time, keep on grazing grass.